Have you ever actually sat down and wondered what it really takes to get into heaven? I mean, if you look across human history and different cultures, the answers are usually pretty consistent, right? We're told we need to perform good deeds, show just absolute unwavering religious devotion, or maybe in some ancient traditions, hoard enough wealth and status to somehow earn favor with the divine. But what if literally all of those metrics, every single one of them, were completely irrelevant? Well, welcome to our latest explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of spiritual literature that completely upends our conventional understanding of the afterlife. Okay, let's dive right into this text. Usually, traditional worldly achievements include things like building massive wealth, climbing the social ladder, maybe funding the construction of these grand, beautiful temples, and showing lifelong devotion. But according to the source text we're analyzing today, the actual requirement for reaching heaven involves absolutely none of the above. Nada. It is this radical departure from mainstream theology, just completely wiping the slate clean of everything human society has traditionally valued. So the source text we're exploring in this explainer is a translated essay titled The Road to Heaven, which was authored by Dioform Buddha in February 2024. Now, before we get too deep, it's super important to note that my role here is not to endorse or debate these beliefs. We're just going to look under the hood and break down the mechanics of this specific spiritual framework. We're going to examine exactly how this philosophy, which is connected to a group called Life Changing One, constructs its incredibly unique view of the universe, mortality, and the afterlife. To make this complex philosophy a bit easier to digest, we've broken it down into 5 parts. 1. Glimpsing heaven on earth. 2. Debunking traditional standards. 3. The single heavenly standard. 4. Achieving true selflessness. And finally, 5. The reincarnation alternative. Simple enough, right? Let's get into it. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Glimpsing Heaven on Earth. So a huge hurdle in literally any spiritual text is trying to explain a place that no living person has ever actually seen. The author tackles this right out of the gate by offering a tangible, earthly proxy, so readers can actually conceptualize what heaven feels like before they, passed away. The text introduces this concept called the second home. This is described as a community created by Life Genuine. Now, the author is really careful to clarify that the second home isn't literally heaven itself, but rather it's an environment that is quote-unquote close to heaven. The logic here is that by knowing and understanding this second home, a person can confidently know that a real heaven exists. It basically serves as a physical, real-world scale model of a divine concept. But hey, what if you can't visit or understand this second home? The author actually provides another, way more universal way to perceive heaven, and that's simply through everyday human interaction. Think about your own relationships for a second. The text states that if the people you interact with consistently bring you happiness, joy, freedom, and bliss, then guess what? You're experiencing a microcosm of heaven right now. The existence of these pure, positive feelings in human relationships is offered up as direct evidence that a heavenly realm exists. Okay, so now that the text has established that heaven is real and something you can perceive, it pivots to aggressively dismantling our preconceived notions of how to actually get there. Moving right along to Section 2, Debunking Traditional Standards. Get ready to toss out the rulebook, because the author dedicates a massive chunk of the text to a rapid-fire list of things that absolutely do not matter for getting into heaven. Social status, wealth, how old you are, your appearance, none of it counts. Even wilder, it explicitly states that your religion, your political party, and whether you've spent your life building churches, mosques, or temples is completely irrelevant. And here is the part that is most shocking to traditional morality. The text claims that doing good deeds, literally saving lives, following specific saints or Buddhas, and even your deep personal devotion and belief have absolutely zero bearing on whether you go to heaven. It's a total rejection of the earthly scoreboard. So, if belief, good deeds, and devotion are all off the table, what in the world is left? That brings us to Section 3, the single heavenly standard. The author just sweeps away all the complex layers of human morality and religion and replaces the whole shebang with one singular, uncompromising rule. There is exactly one standard. That's it. It's not a point system. It's not a cosmic scale balancing your good and bad deeds. It is just one definitive metric that determines if you're eligible for heaven. And that single standard? It's basically a concept of energetic resonance. The text states that your quality of life, and that's life spelled with a capital L-I-F-E, must perfectly match the quality of life in heaven. And how does the author define heaven's quality of life? Very simply, unselfishness and selflessness. You can't just act selfless every now and then. Your fundamental life quality has to literally become indistinguishable from the purest selflessness of the heavenly realm itself. You have to vibrate at that exact frequency. What's absolutely fascinating about this singular standard is the absolute ironclad guarantee it provides. Once a person achieves this genuine state of unselfishness and selflessness, they are, as the text puts it, the life needed by heaven. And because of this exact match in frequency, physical circumstances just go out the window. It guarantees entry regardless of whether you die at 3 years old or 300 years old. It guarantees entry whether you die from natural causes, illness, starvation, or even murder. The physical end of the body is totally irrelevant. The spiritual frequency of your selflessness is everything. But, claiming you need to be perfectly selfless is one thing. Actually achieving it is a whole different ballgame. Which leads us to Section 4, Achieving True Selflessness. So the author provides a really precise, step-by-step earthly roadmap for the practitioner. Step 1, repay debts. You literally cannot owe anything to the mortal world. Step 2, end worldly ties. This means you have to completely disentangle yourself from the emotional and social webs that tie you down to earthly drama. Step 3, make formless alms. This essentially means giving without attachment, giving without secretly wanting a thank you, giving in a way that leaves no trace whatsoever. And finally, Step 4, perfect and beautify the non-material structure of your life. You'll notice none of these steps are about changing the world. They are entirely, 100% about refining the self. Now, this intense focus on the self leads to what I think is the most intriguing paradox in the entire text. Traditional spirituality almost always focuses outwardly, right, on saving others. Well, the author flips this completely upside down. The text explicitly warns against the thought, I want to liberate all beings. Instead, it says, no beings need you to liberate. You are liberating yourself. Liberating oneself is liberating all beings. The philosophy is essentially arguing that the desire to be some great savior for others is actually just a sneaky form of ego. And this brilliantly illustrates the depth of that paradox. The text continues by warning against the thought, I am helping others. The author states plainly, others don't need your help. You are helping yourself. It even cautions against assuming you know what's actually good for someone else, pointing out that what you think is good might literally be harmful to them. By completely stripping away the ego involved in being a savior, the practitioner is forced to focus purely on their own internal spiritual purification. But let's be real, the author is deeply pragmatic about how incredibly difficult this is. The text explicitly states that in a normal, secular environment, one built around money, chasing power, social class, family obligations, and national identity, achieving this required state of selflessness is basically impossible. The worldly ties are just way too strong for a normal person to break. And honestly, this circles back perfectly to why the author introduced the concept of the second home earlier. It's pitched as this optimized, necessary environment designed specifically to help people strip away all those messy worldly ties so they can actually practice true selflessness. But what if you try and fail? What if you just can't sever those ties and achieve perfect selflessness? Well, the text doesn't threaten you with eternal damnation. Instead, it offers a cosmic backup plan. And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, the Reincarnation Alternative. So if you can't hit that single heavenly standard, the author simply advises you to drop the improper thought of going to heaven. Instead, you're supposed to just accept the cycle of reincarnation down in the middle and lower realms. The text lays out this cycle super bluntly. You might live this life as a human, the next life as a dog, the one after that as a pig, and then eventually cycle right back to being a human again. It's just an endless biological loop. Now, what is really interesting about this is the total, complete lack of judgment from the author. Reincarnation isn't framed as some terrible punishment. It's just described as experiencing the full wild spectrum of existence, the sweetness, the bitterness, the sourness, and the spiciness of life. It acknowledges the joys, the sorrows, the inevitability of aging and death. Sure, you're going to live without knowing your past lives, kind of just coming and going in confusion. But remarkably, the author concludes that this endless, confused cycle of earthly experience is actually, quote, a good choice. It is an incredibly neutral, almost peaceful acceptance of the mortal condition for those of us who just aren't ready for heaven. So this philosophy really presents a deeply challenging framework, doesn't it? It demands absolute, flawless perfection of the inner self while entirely dismissing all of our outward actions, charities, and our standard societal metrics of goodness, which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. If trying to help or save others is ultimately just an illusion of the ego, and if liberating yourself is truly the singular way to liberate all beings, does that mean the ultimate path to heaven is inherently solitary? It is a question that turns traditional spirituality completely inside out, and it's definitely something worth chewing on. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the frameworks around you.